Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. My name is Gosia Kuczmowska. I am based in Warsaw, Poland. I am the logistics and personnel specialist of the Global Leaders Program. Before introducing today's esteemed guest, I would like to share a few words about our organization. The Global Leaders Program offers an Ivy League curated executive graduate certificate in social entrepreneurship and cultural agency each year to an international cohort of 50 musical changemakers, distinguished by proven accomplishments and a persevering commitment to excel. Led in partnership with 9 top universities, among them Harvard, Duke, Georgetown, NYU, and McGill, the GLP's teaching faculty includes Nobel laureates, Grammy winners, and TED presenters who work with and support cohort members throughout a 9-month journey that combines online and in-person university-led courses and retreats with on-the-ground fieldwork in more than 40 countries around the world. Facing the pandemic, the Global Leaders Program initiated a series of events designed to support the continued growth of sidelined institutions and professionals from the music sector. So far, these open enrollment webinars have involved the participation of practitioners from more than 40 countries around the world. We feel honored to have you all here, and we do hope this initiative will help you and your organizations to overcome these disruptions. The Spanish Association of Symphony Orchestras is our partner in this journey. It's a nonprofit association set up in 1993, which brings together 35 symphony orchestras from Spain and Portugal. The organization has the aim of promoting and developing a range of initiatives to encourage cooperation and facilitate coordination across all member orchestras in all aspects of their activities, as well as providing a place where people can meet, exchange information, and train. It also speaks up for orchestras at national and international forums and representation of the interests of its members. Today, as public officials, managers, presenters, board members, and other decision makers navigate complex questions of when and how to responsibly return to performance activities in venues, the Global Leaders Program and the Spanish Association of Symphony Orchestras, with support from Fundación BBVA, unite to co-present a new initiative, Resetting the Stage. From public health to economics, from event production to communication strategy. Each conversation convenes a diverse group of industry experts to engage in examining next steps for the sector in a world transformed by social distancing. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce today's illustrious panelists. Valentina Carrasco, co-director, La Fura del Baus, nominated as Best Director for the Next Opera Awards 2020, Valentina has been involved with many internationally successful projects, including Enescu's Odepin at the Royal Opera House Covent Garden in London, the rise and fall of the city of Mahogany at Madrid Teatro Real, and Die Zauberflotte at the Luchtenpintale. Genevieve Cimon, Director of Music Education and Community Engagement, National Arts Centre of Canada, responsible for overseeing 40 unique programs that reach over 100,000 Canadians of all ages and backgrounds each year. Genevieve is particularly interested in the role arts institutions can play to create meaningful partnerships with local communities and educational institutions to effect positive social impact. She recently completed her executive MBA at McGill University, where she focused her research on the role of innovation in cross-sectoral partnerships. Hobart L, music director, Odessa Philharmonic. Born in Venezuela to American parents, Hobart has earned a reputation on several continents as a dynamic and inspiring conductor. He was recognized as one of 30 professionals of the year by the Musical America Worldwide in 2014, and the Russian Cosmonaut Association named a star in the Perseus constellation as Hobart L in 2003. As music director of the Odessa Philharmonic, Hobart raised the status of the orchestra to national and performed extensively abroad, including at such venues as Carnegie Hall and Musikverein. Ángel Gil Ordóñez, music director, Postclassical Ensemble. principal guest conductor of New York's Perspectives Ensemble and music director of the Georgetown University Orchestra. Mr. Gil Ordóñez is a recipient of the Royal Order of Queen Isabella, Spain's highest civilian decoration. He has recorded 8 albums for Naxos, including 3 post-classical ensembles DVDs. Fabienne Krause, General Manager, Classical Next. Berlin-based Fabienne is General Manager of Classical Next, an annual global networking and exchange hub dedicated exclusively to classical and art music. Since the first edition in 2012, around 5,000 art music professionals representing 2,500 companies from 60 countries have participated in this event. Hugo Ticciati, Artistic Director, MODERNT. Violinist and director, Hugo Ticciati imbibes all possible forms of creativity, whether it be performing premieres in Carnegie Hall, improvising with monks in India, or devising innovative programs for MODERNT. Alongside his passion to discover and learn from music of all ages and traditions, Hugo embraces contemporary music, performing works written for him in prestigious halls around the world. Dear panelists, welcome. Now, before welcoming today's moderator, I would also like to share 3 brief housewarming requests to all of you. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a control panel, which includes a questions section. Please go to this section now and write your name, country of residence, and your organization. We will receive and repost many of these into the chat box below to give you all a sense of the great diversity of participants joining us today from all around the world. This questions box is also where you can post comments later in the session to add perspective to the conversation. Again, we will repost many of these into the chat box for the benefit of others. You are also encouraged to engage directly with our panelists by posing a question to one of the question box. Please submit your questions as early as possible in the session, as there will be a limit to how many can be answered. And in posing your question, you may wish to address it to a specific member of our panel today. Finally, at the end of today's session, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey that will appear on your screen. We kindly ask you that you share feedback or suggestions for future sessions as we continue to evolve this growing series to address topics and challenges of relevance to all of you working in this sector around the world. And with that, let's get started. Resetting the Stage will be moderated by the Global Leaders Program alumna and manager with the Spanish Association of Symphony Orchestras, Nathaly Ossa of AEOS. Nathaly, welcome. If you would like to say more about our partnership, please do. I pass the word on to you.
Thank you, Gosha, and welcome all to this 3rd session of the Resetting the Stage. Today we will discuss about new ways of working, artistry, and concert production. This is one of the main subjects for orchestras, choir, opera houses, concert halls around the world right now, at portas of a reopening and probably some summer concerts and some summer festivals ahead. We started this conversation 2 weeks ago with a general overview of the situation around the world. Last week, we analyzed the public health protocols and all the measures that we will probably use in the reopening and in the upcoming concerts. Today is an exciting day because we land in the artistry and music production. We will try to figure it out if it is possible to return to the stages, fulfilling all the public health requirements and at the same time providing an attractive, memorable experience for our audiences. And also, we will think about the digitalization of the symphonic concerts. So we are more than glad to count on the experience and creative minds from our panelists today. So we will discuss this with 6 points. First, we're going to start with the new visions for artistic experiences. Then we're going to talk about partnerships and other resources. We're going to think if the historical tradition of classical music is open to change. We're also going to think about the adaptability and flexibility for the larger establishment, if digitalization is a risk or opportunity, and what we can learn from this moment. So I invite Valentina Carrasco. Valentina. So Valentina, as a stage director, Do you see the new public health regulations as an opportunity for creative directors to create or reinvent new visions for how artistic experiences unfold on stage? Do you think there will be an aesthetic evolution into a pandemic artistic language?
Well, I think, of course, as any restriction from restrictions can also become impulses, of course. And of course, as an artist, that's what you tend to do. You tend to use restriction as a possibility, and this is my view. In general, in life, as a stage director, you cross a lot of those things as you work. Problems with a singer, problem with an actor, problem with a piece of set. So you can just, collapse under the weight of, difficulties, or you can use them to overcome them and use them as a tool more than as an obstacle. On the other hand, of course, there's a question if reality is going into this direction, if reality is going into the direction of we don't touch each other, we don't communicate in this human manner anymore. And therefore, of course, art will have to face that question, of course. But there are, of course, ways to sort of patch the situation in the meantime. Of course, you can address different repertoire, for example. Of course, you can decide that we can play different kind of pieces that involve less people. You can also decide to use a different kind of aesthetics and say, okay, we might use like a more hierarchic kind of movement on a stage that doesn't involve me touching the other performer. But not even touching means also I cannot even, talk to him in the ear, supposedly. All this can be, of course, faced and can be sort of seen for a moment as a challenge. If it becomes a rule, then not. Then it becomes a real restriction. Then it becomes something else for me. In that way, then you should think of doing completely something else. In my point of view, you need to think of doing something completely different and really reinvent the whole concept of what performing art means. I think performing arts have this particular gift, but it's also its difficulty that is like it's temporary. It goes away in a second. It's no longer there. You can never be rock. You will always be sand in performing arts, and the wind will blow it as soon as you finish it, or even before. So, and that's the heart for me of performing arts. And if that is taken away, then it's no longer performing arts, which is not a problem. I mean, we have to think about that too, but then it's something else. In the meantime, as I was saying, you can try to use different languages. There are stage directors who have developed in the past, not now, languages that are very hierarchic and very aesthetic and very about proportions of spaces that allows people not to get too close to each other as a positive thing, not as a restrictive thing. And as a personal situation, I wouldn't mind doing a show like that, but I can not think that the rest of my work will be like that. Then I will have to think of something else, of doing something completely different. There's of course a lot of things for like doing things with solo performances as dancers or as actors, as singers. This can also challenge a lot of new compositions to be made. That would be maybe something the world is always talking about, the opera world in particular, which is more the one that I'm involved in. In theater, it happens a lot, so that's why I don't mention it. But in opera, of course, there's always lack of weight of the new compositions in general, although there are a lot, but in the weight of the general repertoires of the houses is not, of course, the main part, as opposite activity used to be in the 19th century, where most of the operas were contemporary. So that would be a chance to grasp this chance to create new pieces for one singer, one performer, one. So maybe that's the most interesting approach in this case for me, like to create from zero something that works for this. Of course, these things need time. You cannot do them tomorrow. Therefore, composers, they need their brainy days and stuff and inspiration. Of course, it's their job. And the librettist also, and it's not easy. But maybe it's a moment to dig up all that repertoire, and it's a moment to maybe give a second chance to many operas that have been performed very few times, that are already composed, and therefore they're waiting on the desk to be played again. Again, I'm of the thought that restrictions again is what makes your shape also. No, it's like, for me, it's like a balloon. No, the gummy part of the balloon is a restriction for the air, but it's also what makes it. No, so gives it a shape. So I don't mind restrictions. What I sometimes mind is if the whole thing is going in this direction because of a non-artistic situation. Of course, it's a sanitary emergency, or as you call it. But I think, of course, we always think of sanitary emergencies as a first thing, and sometimes we might think that maybe it's not the first thing. You know, I know it's maybe a bit politically not super ultra correct to say that, but maybe, you know, art is about risk and about, like, you know, I surrender to certain things. You know, like I'm not sure every artist in their lives, the famous ones, of course, have decided to prevail sanitary measures and life before their art. I think history of art is full of the contrary examples. No, so of course that makes you think about it. I think there's ways to do this. I think, however, I think we have to be, in my humble point of view, we have to be the sort of the stone against this will hit in a way. I think we have to ask ourselves the question whether there's not a time to risk certain things. And if this, again, for me, performing arts is about being there, hearing it in the moment. It's wonderful to have the chance to have all these streamings, because at least, well, there's something we can get. But streaming is a digital code. It's not performing arts. Streaming is something that is on a box and we play anytime we want. And performing arts is not. Performing arts is made of mistakes. It's made of those things that vanish. The very little moment is gone, and that's the fabulous thing about it. It's not being a sculpture. So I think, yeah, we have to sort of. I think we have to be brave and, you know, use it for a moment, but then just, you know, push it away. That's my feeling. Of course, my position is a bit more comfortable in that aspect because I don't have to decide that. I mean, someone will tell me you're not allowed to do that, of course. And in that case, of course, the weight is on the shoulders of the head of the institutions, of course. And I can only give my gut feeling about it. But I think art is made of courage also, and that's what we have to keep in mind. I think, however, we have to use this opportunity also, again, to discover repertoire and to, you know, don't forget that life is what is alive, not what is in a screen.
Yes.
And so.
Thank you, Valentina. Now we go with Genevieve from the National Arts Center of Canada. So this National Arts Center plays the role of a leader for an entire country. In this capacity, do you see ways for national creative organizations like NAC Canada to help smaller institutions or independent local artists navigate through this moment through partnerships and other resources?
Yes, absolutely, Nathaly. I thought I would just share that I've had the pleasure of working at the National Arts Centre in Canada for 18 years. And we're uniquely positioned as a federal institution to have a national and international mandate in addition to serving our local audiences. We're bilingual, multidisciplinary. We have 6 programming departments. And we recently launched a department of Indigenous theatre. And of course, each department is led by an artistic director and or executive producer who program exciting seasons. Now, like many large cultural institutions, we've had the desire to break down silos and work more collaboratively. but it's not been easy as planning cycles differ from discipline to discipline, and each artistic director has complete autonomy to produce the season he, she, they envision. However, when we've been able to come together to work collaboratively through festivals, anniversaries, or other thematic initiatives, we've always seen great results. But nothing has spurred us on to work across departments as a truly integrated team in record time overnight, in fact, as has COVID-19. So in mid-March, as Canada started to respond to the crisis with social distancing restrictions, my colleague Heather Gibson, the executive producer of our popular music and variety department, struck a partnership with Facebook Canada to create a $100,000 relief fund for touring artists whose source of income would be dramatically affected. So that was on March 15th, and on March 19th, we officially launched Canada Performs. The program has been successful beyond our expectations. The relief fund grew 7 times, and by the end of May, over 700 artists will have received $1,000 each to perform live on the platform. And we've had an overwhelming number of classical musicians send applications. So it's been targeted to support professional performing artists and published authors. And we received over 6,000 applications and deployed our staff in ways we never thought possible to meet the demand. So cross-departmental teams were created, new skill sets were learned, and Canadian artists had the opportunity to access our production staff to learn how to optimize their technology to perform effectively from their living rooms. So I invite you to go to the National Arts Centre website and you can listen to the live streams of the artists performing from their living rooms. So over 4.2 million people have tuned in, and our producers have come across artists not necessarily on their radars that they'll invite back in the future. It's been a great scouting opportunity in addition to providing a much needed service for artists at this time. And the program has inspired a similar model in Ireland. So as our sector starts to open up again, the program will shift focus to give support to local partners for them to produce content on the Canada Performs Facebook Canada platform. And this brings me to our role, to the role our national organization wishes to play. So we've been extremely lucky to have Christopher Deacon as our CEO throughout this crisis. We were in the final stages of launching a new strategic plan, and under his leadership, the senior management team was tasked to create a new 3-year recovery plan that will respond to the global crisis we find ourselves in. Suffice to say, it will be externally focused, and we're in the midst of consulting with organizations of all sizes across our country to see how we can collaborate through commissions, co-productions, and the dissemination of new work in order to lift our sector out of this crisis. So we're working with 40 organizations to establish reopening guidelines for our sector, and we're leading a national consumer survey to track trends for the return of audiences. So partnerships are key here, and innovation through collective action is needed more than ever. Partnerships are considered the collaborative paradigm of the 21st century and often touted as being the magic bullet to deal with complex social problems. In spite of this, there's little to no formal training or guidelines to offer to cultural institutions, and often little leadership support for how to partner effectively. Many partnerships fail to produce significant results, and it leads to, unfortunately, power struggles, conflict, and can be very expensive, and they often have a failure rate of between 30 and 60%. But when partnerships are successful, innovation is often cited as an outcome. Now, as Nathaly mentioned, I've spent my career partnering with organizations of all sizes, and I decided to return to school to complete my MBA with the intention to research the success factors required to innovate successfully through partnerships. And this is what I learned. Creating value should be the central justification for partnering. And value creation is a dynamic process that changes as the relationship between partners evolve. So when partners are able to shift from creating alone to creating with others, co-creation, or even co-curating, and what cultural institutions see more often, co-producing, value is amplified and the conditions are ripe to allow for innovation. For that to happen, the people engaged in the partnership need to have time to build what a lot of folks call social capital, establish trust, shared values, and opportunities to interact and co-create so as to dissolve boundaries between organizations. But they also need to be able to take risks, make mistakes, fail fast and fail forward. So design thinking can be an extremely helpful tool to use in setting up a partnership to mitigate risk. Its first stage deploys empathetic thinking and puts the user at the forefront in decision-making, while the iteration and prototyping of ideas establishes a culture of continuous learning. I believe this is a time when creating a partnership-ready learning culture is more important than ever. Organizations need to invest in joint partnership training programs, reciprocal secondments, and internships. There's so much value to be gained there. From micro to macro, here are a few final insights. So individuals gain value when they learn and build relationships through the act of co-curation, co-creation, and co-production with peers outside of their immediate teams or institutions. Organizations gain value through association, transferred resources, interaction, and synergy, as co-creation and shared decision-making leads to innovative outcomes. And finally, society gets value from innovative partnerships that offer sustainable and scalable solutions, new knowledge, and resources to meet the challenges we are all facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. Hobart, the Odessa Philharmonic is an institution steeped in a great orchestral tradition. In the case of a very established cultural city like Odessa, where audiences may have long-held expectations of what a symphonic concert should look and sound like, do you think the musicians and the public will be open to the kind of experiential changes that might be required as a result of social distancing? As their artistic director, what ideas are you considering for how to navigate this challenge? Just one sec, Howard, because we cannot hear you. Just 1 minute. Now, can you try now?
Gracias, Nathaly. Buenas noches a Madrid. Dobry wieczór, Odessa. And hello to everyone. You've posed a huge question, because this is a dilemma for a large symphony orchestra, which is what we are. We have 99 full-time musicians paid by the government of Ukraine, and we have 19 administrative staff. So the Odessa Philharmonic Orchestra, we're a big organization. And the dilemma is with symphony orchestras that the larger the orchestra, the more important it is to sit close together, because the further apart you sit, the less well you hear each other. And that's a problem. So that's our dilemma, is how are we going to move forward? And I guess having listened to the presentation so far, I'm going to be the voice of tradition today, because we're going to try, I think we have to try to stay as close as possible to what we've done in the past. I think that's what's going to be expected of us by the local audience. Of course, we don't know. Nobody knows. Where are we going to be by now in September, when the time comes for the new season and the festival we have planned? But the whole crisis on the planet now is very localized. Ukraine is blessed by not having been hit very hard by COVID-19. It closed down early enough, so the cases are low. We don't know what's going to happen between now and then. But our mission is to provide a diverse season. And the diverse season means, of course, Mozart, Beethoven symphonies with smaller size orchestras, obviously. It means contemporary music. It means large projects. That's what's always been expected of us. What we did in recent months, for example, speaking of two large projects, was a piece by Penderecki, God rest his soul, Seven Gates of Jerusalem. Huge orchestra, choir, 5 vocal soloists, 19 offstage wind players, and 2 gigantic tubophones. It's a logistic problem just to fit them on the stage in normal circumstances. But this was a very special project, and I think the audience in Odessa, if they're there right now, they know that they will remember this concert it was one of his last trips to attend a performance outside of Poland, God rest his soul. They will remember that concert for a long time to go. That was in December. And another large project we did was Weinberg's 21st Symphony for the 75th commemoration, well, commemorating the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And Weinberg's 21st Symphony is an amazing piece, but it's huge. It's 6 movements, it's an hour long. We had 10 double basses on stage. In addition to our usual 8, we added 2 basses, quadruple woodwind, 2 saxophones, almost every keyboard and percussion instrument you want to imagine, vibraphone, xylophone, marimba, celesta, piano, and a singer, vocalise. And that was also an unforgettable performance. But how do you, I mean, going forward, you know, what we were supposed to be doing right now, this very week in Odessa, was Liszt's Faust Symphony with choir. And of course, choir, I think, is going to be even more difficult than orchestras, because the medical experts say that it's easier to spread the virus, unfortunately, with Cimon. I was very happy to hear that the Vienna Philharmonic did their tests, and they decided, according to scientific evidence, that no more than 75 centimeters was needed to separate the musicians, which is great. And they said they would refuse to play with plastic. I think that's wonderful. It may prove to be more difficult than we imagine. We have, of course, right now, nothing really going on in Odessa. For the past couple of months, everything's been closed, but the government of Ukraine has allowed 50 musicians to rehearse, in theory, representing social distancing guidelines, no performances, but 50 groups of 50 people can come together and rehearse. And we're actually going to do a webcast next week for the first time ever. It's technologically complicated, but we're going to try and do it. Let's see how it works, with small groups, obviously, and respecting the social distancing norms. And then we get into the park season in Odessa. Now, Odessa and all of Ukraine, it's Eastern Europe, so it's a different mentality. And I think one of the things about Odessa that's special, we have to know, is that they have a humor, they have a smile to their lives, and a smile way of thinking of things. And the impression I have from what I am told is that right now everyone in Odessa is basically out on the street, a lot of them without masks. The beaches are full. The restaurants are not open yet, but the bars and cafes on the street are all open, and there are lots of people on the street. It may not be the safest thing to be doing, and maybe not the wisest, but that's what's happening. And so we are planning, in theory, to do summer park concerts. I don't know how that's going to work, but we're going to try to do that there. It's easy because the space is wide. If we need to social distance the orchestra a little bit, we'll do it. If we need to social distance them a lot, we'll do it even more. It's outdoors, so the acoustics are different, and we have a lot of space in those parks. Well, then we come to September, where we have a big festival planned. And by the way, there's another festival planned in Odessa in August, which is not our festival. But just so that you know, they've planned that festival as if this didn't happen. They moved it from June to August, and they still have it there. They have hardly changed anything. And of course, they don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen between now and August. Time will tell, but they've planned it. They're continuing with that. And part of our festival should be easy if we have to social distance, because Mozart and Beethoven orchestras were doing the first performance probably in Odessa of Die Geschöpfe des Prométhée, Beethoven's only ballet. Sir Andras Schiff is coming to play Beethoven's 5th piano concerto, and that sort of repertoire will be easier to do. But we have some things planned that we don't really want to change, at least now. We're going to do Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde together with Penderecki's 6th Symphony, which was his last piece, an entire evening of ancient Chinese poetry. Now that's big orchestra. We're also going to be doing the world premiere of a piece by Zadiratsky, who was a forbidden Soviet composer, together with some Shostakovich excerpts from Katerina Izmailova, Lady Macbeth of Mtensk, which is, again, that's huge orchestra. I mean, here's the dilemma. How can you perform Shostakovich with social distancing? It's just, you know, you're going to be making compromises. And, you know, Valentina was saying that you always have to find creative ways I remember a story from the 90s when the Odessa Philharmonic was on tour. We were very worried. We had a North American concert hall. I won't say which one, it's not important. We were very worried because we'd been told the acoustics were not good there. We would not hear each other on stage. I was very worried about that. We got on stage, they'd set up the stage for us, and my musicians instinctively started moving the stands closer together. And then my stagehands came on and we put our setup, but we had basically 100 musicians on the stage using only about 2/3 of that huge stage. And we had no problem hearing each other. It was fine. And I told this to Russell Johnson, God rest his soul, a dear friend of mine. He says, oh yes, I know that hall. I know the music director always says, I know what I need to get them to sit closer together, but I can't persuade them to do that. And so the local orchestra at that time, the hall's since been restored, had a problem hearing each other. So if you try to do large orchestras with social distancing, you're going to have a problem for the musicians to create a quality product, because even on our stage, which is big, the people in the corners don't necessarily hear so well. Now, music is not the language of fear. And there's a lot of fear on the planet right now. Music, I suppose, can depict fear. It can certainly, I suppose, evoke fear in certain responses. The wonderful thing about music is that everyone reacts to it differently. It's a very subjective experience. But music is the language of peace and brotherhood. It's a language of harmony, a language of passion. It sort of represents our common humanity in a unique way, and a high spiritual realm. And so this idea of compromising is something that I don't think the local audience expects us to do. I think they expect us, and they hope that we will be able to do this as close as possible, depending on what the guidelines are, because we're government funded. Basically, the government of Ukraine is going to tell us what we can or cannot do in terms of having 100 people on the stage. So we have a lot of young people in the audience, and it's as I say, I'm the voice of tradition here, and I don't know if that's going to be the way we can work, but we're certainly going to try our best to do that. So in that spirit, my message is try not to be fearful, stay safe, and be well. And
thank you, Howard. With that message, we go now to Washington, D.C. to Angel. So Angel, you have been for 17 years artistic director of the Postclassical Ensemble, a chamber ensemble in the United States that is known for being extremely adaptable and collaborative. You have made a pattern through your history of being innovative in terms of performing in many different kinds of spaces, many kinds of music, particularly contemporary, and working with many multidisciplinary partners. Do you think that there is an opportunity for smaller and potentially more nimble ensembles like yours to lead this process of piloting new formats, new spaces, and new concepts that could act as a beacon and influencer to the larger establishment?
Thank you, Nathaly. Thank you all. It's an honor to be here. Nathaly, before responding to your question, I would like to start by saying that I became a musician to share music with others. To preserve the experience of the live performance is for me crucial, so I cannot agree more with Hobart. This is crucial. Our efforts during this pandemic should be focused on creating the safe conditions to achieve that goal. How can we not? An orchestra is one of the greatest achievements of humanity. What can you compare to the experience of having a group of musicians playing and singing together? It's a miracle. So as music directors, we want to share that magical experience with as many people as possible. And now we have a pandemic, my goodness. So are we learning something from this terrible pandemic? Do we want to go back and doing exactly what we were doing? To your question, Nathaly, the short answer is yes. Postclassical Ensemble will survive this pandemic, and I'm going to explain why. The main reason is a simple, very simple word: flexibility. What reactions are we observing during the pandemic from traditional musical institutions through their online presence? This is very interesting. I'm observing that all day. So this is the questions I have after watching all this online presence. Do we need to give concerts every week? Does an orchestra have to have always a large ensemble of 100 players? Does a concert have to last 2 hours or more? Do we need to perform complete symphonies? Why not just one movement? Can a traditional symphonic concert include a string quartet? Do we need to perform in concert halls? Suddenly, symphony orchestras, to me this is very important, are emphasizing not only the chamber music characteristic also that an symphony orchestra has, but even more importantly, focusing on single individuals. Orchestras are realizing that the fifth music stand left in the second violin section is an extraordinarily articulated lady that speaks 3 languages and explains beautifully his part in a Debussy La Mer or L'Octave. This is fascinating to me. So we are seeing that more traditional models are forced to be flexible. I created Postclassical Ensemble together with the brilliant music historian Joseph Horowitz 17 years ago, with the conviction that a flexible structure and a flexible programmatic mandate was the response to the decline of the audience to symphonic concerts in the United States. So Europe is not yet there, but in the United States, we are suffering that. People are not going to concerts the way they were going 50 years ago. So our conviction is that an orchestra is an educational institution. As a music director, conductor, I'm an educator. An orchestra reflects the culture of its community. The work of an orchestra is an extraordinary balance between knowing your community, their interests, their culture, helping them to understand better what they love, but also our obligation as artists is to challenge them to get out of their comfort zone and have them explore music that they are not familiar with. Postclassical Ensemble is, of course, interested in the converted, in those who had the privilege of to have been educated in music, but we are even more interested in those who don't know yet that they love Beethoven and Schoenberg. In that group, I'm including art lovers, theater lovers, jazz, pop, folk music lovers, film lovers, etc. So our conviction is that they don't attend concerts because the traditional format, overture, piano concerto, symphony, it doesn't attract them. So let's change the format. How can we incorporate elements to which this audience does relate? Film, visual art, dance, narration, etc. Besides, how do we create, very important, a sense of occasion in each performance? The surprise factor. You know, the best compliment I receive after a performance from our audiences, when I come to your performance, I have no idea what is going to happen. Isn't that great? Exactly that. Surprise. You go to the film and you don't know who is the killer. I mean, if you know who the killer is. Anyway, let's keep going. This is what we have been doing for 17 years. We are constantly exploring ways to share the music we love with our audience. We are constantly experimenting. As Genevieve said, we have made so many mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but we have learned a lot in the way. So we contextualizing the music we perform, we tell a story in each performance. Postclassical Ensemble is, of course, the reflection of a very, very specific community in Washington, D.C., in the area of Washington, D.C. The community is highly educated, international, with an incredible art, theater, and film scene. The African-American community is crucial to understand the culture of the city. We, of course, are totally aware that we are not the only way to attract new audiences, and that our vision might not be exportable to a different community. Is what Hobart was saying. Odessa is a community of converted. Bravo for you, Hobart. They have a complete different necessities than our community. So this is what we do under normal circumstances. What are we doing under these circumstances? We are focusing even more on education. We have now more time to go deeper into the context in which the music was created through videos, online sessions, etc. We have the opportunity through a means like Zoom, like this one, to create sessions with our subscribers, which are helping us to know them better. So we are knowing better. This is offering us the possibility of knowing better our audience. Now we have faces of the people that visit our performances. We have established a wonderful partnership with the American Interest. Do you know this organization? The American Interest, a forum created by the political scientist Francis Fukuyama to discuss political, social, and cultural issues. So in these sessions, we present some of our past live performances and invite experts to join us to contextualize and discuss the works performed. Recent titles we have done: Deep River, The Art of the Spiritual, Shostakovich and the State, talking about the difficult relationship between Shostakovich and Stalin, and we're going to do a program on George Gershwin next. That will be the next one. So as many orchestras are doing, also our musicians are individually creating their own videos that relate to the last program. So the next step would be performances without an audience. So we are hoping that with musicians separated in safe distances, we will be able in the fall to create smaller groups for that without an audience. And then we are planning our season, our spring season already, with hopefully with an audience too. And to finalize, let's talk about the elephant in the room: money. So let me tell you an anecdote, which is, I think it's attributed to Brahms, who would said, a friend to him approached him, and Brahms said to him, please introduce me to bankers to talk about music, because with musicians, I only talk about money. It's true. So we have to talk about money. In Europe, governments are responding to the situation with different levels of compromise. We have, of course, to worship and secure help from the government to secure our work. In our case, the Postclassical Ensemble in Washington, D.C., the United States, we have to rely in the support of the community we are serving. Postclassical Ensemble has been walking on a tightrope for 17 years. This is not new to us, this situation of the pandemic. We trust our community, and they will continue supporting us. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Angel. Now we go to Fabienne. At the beginning of the lockdown, we were overwhelmed with all the mountain of digital content and a lot of homemade concerts directly from the musicians' living room as a quick response to the impossibility of performing together in the concert halls. As you have been speaking with members of the Classical Next community around the world, is there a concern that this strategy is a risky one? In other words, are you concerned that all the free digital content that has been given to audiences in recent months may somehow actually be undermining the unique appeal for the ticketed concert hall experience for audiences? Or alternatively, do you see this free digital content as potentially reaching new audiences and helping to drive an increased demand in person concert experiences once these become available again?
Thanks, Nathaly, for the questions, and thanks to the Global Leaders Program for having me. As General Manager of Classical Next, which is actually a physical meeting for art music professionals from every sector and every region, we actually would be in Rotterdam right now to realize our event, which usually features a conference, a showcase festival, and an expo. But times have changed, and so we also took the opportunity to facilitate some of our sessions and formats online. since it's our ongoing mission to be a platform for sharing knowledge and spreading innovation to promote positive change. Yes, but we only can do this online right now. This is why we started this online program this and the upcoming week. So far we had a great experience and high participation number, which again shows the need to meet and exchange even online in difficult times. And this as a background, and what I try to do now is we also see an ongoing exchange of today's topic on how to create new concert formats digitally and physically. So I'm happy to share what our community shared with us so far. Ideas coming from various sectors like festivals, orchestras, concert halls, export offices, individual artists and composers, and so on. And we actually hope that at our next physical event, whenever that may happen again, we even can feature some of the most creative ideas and of new concept formats created in times of COVID. So to speak about the digital question and topic, in general, I think there is no one answer to the question. Do we all have to go digital or not? As often the case, this depends on each individual situation and perspective. But if going digital is the way, I believe this will still last as an additional resource long-term, and hopefully will and can add substantial value to the arts. One good example actually comes from the cellist and video artist David Fernandez, aka Cello. I don't know if you know him. With his project Multi-Touch Me Not. This was part of our live streamed Innovation Award yesterday. And he works with little touch screens attached to his cello. And so he bridges the gap between classical music and the technological world, while pushing the interaction between music performance and technology to its limits. And at the same time, he reveals the alienation that technology implies, but highlighting at the same time the enormous communicative power it possesses. But let me give you a little more insight of what was discussed within our community so far. Some of the sectors are not really convinced of what is happening online in terms of concerts at the moment, and just want to go back to live concerts as soon as possible. They don't see very valuable quality outcome and say that the web is flooded with too many bad concerts and examples. So after a first wave of numerous online concerts and streaming 24/7, all offered for free, now we are entering a next phase, I think. The question came up if free online concerts actually devalue the art and how to monetize the content in the next phase. But some see it in the contrary, see it as an opportunity to adapt to the digital world, and they always plan to do it anyways as an additional part of their activities. Maybe they started already, and this situation might even serve as a catalyst to reach their goal they always had. And also to, of course, reach a wider audience and ways to monetize content. You also might see it this way. Digital concerts and streaming are actually a genre on its own and can't or shouldn't be a substitute for live concerts anyways. So it often was mentioned that the way to go should be to create digital versions of concerts which also have to work after the crisis is over. So to create artistically driven formats and not just based on the Corona situation and with a lasting value. Other questions were discussed, like, will the audience behavior change in future? When are people willing to come back to the concert hall? In what way do we have to adapt the programming? Do they have to be more intimate concerts, smaller, shorter concerts, shorter programs? Should we do more non-traditional programming? And I know that research is underway and we will probably only find out after a while. It was also mentioned that collaborations with other disciplines are very important. Obviously finding the technical skills. And some said they will change formats, but the repertoire and content will stay the same. One other last great example I want to share is by Podium Festival Eslingen, a very innovative young festival from the south of Germany. Since they anyway work with miniature formats of bigger orchestral works. They created the St. John's Passion. I actually saw it at Oranje Festival in the Netherlands last year, which is just for tenor, harpsichord, organ, and percussion instruments. So it's a condensed version of the bigger work. The audience sings the choir part, which is how it actually happened in Bach times. They did a live streaming in Leipzig at the Thomas Church, so the original Bach church, which was a real viral hit of around 700,000 viewers, which were choir singers from all over the world were sitting in front of the screens with the partitures in front of them. It was also a collaboration with the Bach Society, and suddenly the whole global Bach community came together online. So this actually intimate format, they already created before COVID. They just had to adapt slightly and could use it. The questions they asked themselves were always, how can we create very intimate concerts, working with creative concert designers? And the goal was and still is that it has to be valuable after the crisis and more immersive. And what it comes down to as well for them is the community building. For them, it is very strong, and they felt the need to nourish it and then try to monetize. A lot of funding actually came in from the community. So they also think in how can we reinvest into the community. And this is a very unique example, but also a kind of rare example here in Germany. I know that it's more common in the US, for example, and a lot of festivals here in Germany still are not working that way. So yeah, I don't know. I could share more, but probably the time is running. So I'm happy to hand back to you, Nathaly.
Thank you, Fabienne. Maybe we can go through after with the questions. So Hugo, after hearing all these different perspectives, what can we learn from this moment? As an artistic director in Sweden and a creative person involved in the design of festivals and performances, what opportunities do you see for artistic innovation now that might not have been apparent a few months ago? Do you think this whole experience is going to require us to develop new habits as a sector? And if so, what will those habits be?
Thank you, Nathaly, and thank you everyone for inspiring talks. A lot of you have been looking at the more logistical and practical elements, and I hope you can forgive me for slightly taking a bird's eye view and a possibly more utopian approach to what we're going through. And I think often when we look back in our personal lives, the times of trouble, the times of suffering, when we look back, it's actually those times where we transform, when we change, or we heal, where there are opportunities are given to us. And I think I'm hoping that the post-COVID period will also be a time of reflection. But if we can already start reflecting now, what actually it presents us, the possibilities, the opportunities of transformation. And I would say, for me, this silence and the space that this time is offering us is an incredible blessing for musicians, for artists general, and creativity. Because if one looks back to a post-COVID period, there's so much going on culturally, amazing things. But for me, there was a sense of saturation. It was just an absolute, it was noise. There was so much going on, even if it was all of amazing quality. But unless, just like a Haydn quartet, unless you have those moments of silence, the pause, that beauty there, then the creation begins. One needs that contrast. And I think we got into a slight, just the habit of producing, innovating, creating on a treadmill, which is fantastic in many ways, but also has the element of oversaturation. And I think if one looks at performance, and I speak also as a violinist, there is this going from one concert to the next festival, that ensemble, and there's a lot of traveling, and there's a lot of noise in that sense. There's a lot of repertoire to cover, a lot of people one's meeting, and again, enriching in many ways, but possibly this stepping back, this silence, this space, this time we have can also be a window, an opportunity to open up into something, who knows. And then looking, if one, the lovely word, small, you use in the book, musicking, and we've all talked about it, it's the composers, the creators, it's the performers, it's the audience. The heart of all of this is the audience. And I think as a musician, I've often experienced audiences in many different ways, but I feel there's a danger that the audience can become passive. They listen in a passive way. They know what to expect. And this ties in beautifully what Angela was doing, and everything he's doing sounds like what needs to be doing. People need to come to concerts and be shocked, have no idea what's going to happen. And exactly, and yes to all your questions. Shall we just play movements? Shall we? So thank you, Angela, for that. That was beautiful. So I think the challenge is to recreate an active listening, an active participation from the audience, so they feel they are co-creating, they're part of the performance. And it's not just us presenting and them consuming, but it's us together, performers, audience, the piano tuner, the lighter, everyone involved in this complex cultural system, that we're all offering something, we're all active in the process. So for me, how can one do that? How can one re-engage the audience after the silence? And one looks at so many great composers, great artists, and it's often after periods of silence, after periods of struggle. One takes Schoenberg, one takes Arvo Pärt, one takes Beethoven. Really, any creative artist needs those times of silence, needs that time of space, and out of that are born new things. And I totally agree with Hobart as well. There, sometimes it will be returning to traditional, because that is right in that context. So it's not like we should all be creating new and innovative things. Everything, every person, every institution has their own approach and will have their own approach. But I think we should take this silence, take this time, and take this space to open up within ourselves. And when we think about the audience being spaced out, or having whatever, your 2 meters between them. But if one thinks of that also metaphorically, to create a space within them, so they're not listening out of habit, not listening out of, we've come to listen to the overture, the concerto, and the symphony, or whatever it is they're experiencing, but open them up to new possibilities. And that challenges, I think, performers particularly, to open themselves up to be more vulnerable and to offer silence in concerts, to have that moment where you share not sound but silence. And again, that goes back to cultural institutions, that goes back to festival directors, where it's not always about creating, it is also about resting in the stillness. It's resting in that moment before the creation, a moment before the thought, that offers so much beauty and so much potential. And I think one of the dangers of such a period is people are thinking, how can we recreate what was? How can we go back? How can we sort of replant? the trees that were beautiful before, and of course, incredible trees and incredible institutions and incredible people in creativity before this moment of stillness, or whatever one wants to call it. And my challenge for myself is not to dive back in as a director, as a violinist, and in collaborating with many people, but to take this time and plant seeds, let things grow up at their own pace, their own way, and approach things really with new eyes, with a freshness. It might go back into exactly as we think it was, but it would be totally different. It would be instilled, and on the back of this silence, it might grow into something radically different. But I think it's the space within us, with that stillness, which we all need to find as creative people, musicians, artists, directors, that this pandemic is offering us that opportunity and possibility to do that. So despite, of course, the suffering on personal levels of people close to undying, on economic levels, many of our friends are suffering economically. If we can look through that and approach it as this, maybe this people would not like this word, but a sort of blessing, to stillness, a blessing to return, to be open, and then respond out of that openness, and not fit everything straight away as soon as things are possible. We do it again, but just let it be for a bit, and then see how things develop. And of course, out of that silence, all the creative energies, all the creative juice will rise to the surface and create much beauty. So I see this, and again, a rather utopian perspective, and I hope you can forgive me for that. But I feel this is a wonderful opportunity to, and if one, to say the very last thing, if one looks on on a level of humanity, this is like it's like a reset. It really has. Everyone is thinking, reflecting, and have been given that space to reflect. And some people negatively, some people positively, of course. But I think there is a sense of spiritual reset for humanity, which we shouldn't ignore, and can really sink into and possibly develop from. So those are my few words.
Thanks. Thank you, Hugo. So I think we have some time here for questions. So this first question is for Valentina. Valentina, this is from Maggie, our music educator. She is from the GLP cohort from 2018, member of Inspiration Persona in USA. Valentina, do you have any advice about rehearsal configurations? Do you have to open your microphone, Valentina? Yeah.
Sorry. Having worked with singers long enough, I have the little experience of me being in a kind of fluid state and having to go to work. So, of course, that is the closest I ever got to rehearsing in a situation like that. Working, of course, with children is different than working with adults. I have worked with children a lot. Like I make children perform a lot in my work. I like it. I enjoy their company. But it's I think you have to make them work. In my point of view, what a child can do from in these situations is to make them grow some kind of character, to make them give them patterns of movement, of patterns of characters they can fulfill. If you're talking about the stage terms, I'm not talking about musicians, of course, it's not my specialty. But I think my problem is that in general, again, as I said in the beginning, I'm not very in favor of fear. And of course, again, the weight of responsibility of a teacher is enormous because you have the kids, and what happens to your kids, it's your responsibility. So of course it's different too, but you need to probably make it more like a game, keep children engaged in that very easily, of course. make them perform maybe a task, and the other one has to respond as if had been made to with contact, but without. No, that makes you also, for example, if I don't know, if I play that I push you but I don't touch you, and then the person away from you falls. No, you can play these games, for example. No? Maybe the pushing is not the best example because it's a bit aggressive. Yes. I'm sure you can do like if I give you something to eat, or if I, you know. But of course, the pushing is also fun, so it also helps. Because I think one of the important things, I really have worked not for children, but with children a lot. I introduce children as soon as I can in this, because I like their freshness and the unreliableness in a way. I like it a lot. But they really engage with games, but they're also very brave at following rules, because they know their children and they know you're the adult. And you probably as a teacher know that very well. But if they engage in the game, they lose for me, the whole point of this situation of the pandemic is that it gives us a lot of fear, and it gives us a lot of fear of the other. The other one is a danger, you know? So that is really, for me, like one of the worst things of this situation, whether it's justifiable or not is some other debate, of course, but in any case, it gives something that goes, is something that is really against the contact with the person, no? And I think you have to erase that from children. You have to make them turn that into a game. We're going to play things as if we could touch, but we don't. And then we can analyze, for example, that's also something I do with adults, so not with children, but how we do actions. When we are so engaged in the action, we don't realize how we perform it, because we are in the aim of doing it. You know, if I have to take this glass, and I have to aim to the glass, I don't think how my gesture will be. This is a chance to do that. This is a chance to maybe, and when you have to perform, it's not about grabbing the glass. It's about, in a way, playing that you grab the glass. Of course, you're going to grab the glass, but you have to play it, and the performance of the gesture is very important. This is a moment to maybe focus on those things. And more external, but at the same time more, well, that can be used also as a game.
Thanks, Valentina. As we have some number of questions, I'm going to ask you to please answer like in 1 minute, so we can go through as many questions as we can. Okay, so Angel, this question is for you from Victor Ambroa. Do you think that this is the time for small chamber groups, small orchestras can make new repertoires and recover things perhaps forgotten or lost from less known or less played composers?
Mi querido Víctor Ambroa, buenas tardes, desde Washington. Yes. This is the moment to symphony orchestras explore that in the end, symphony music is chamber orchestral music. So this is the moment to explore new formats. This is the moment to explore individuality, as I said before, to let individuals in the group that were not as visible before to show up and do things. And of course, repertoire. I think, as Hugo said, this is a moment, I mean, silence is the essence of music. So we need to start with silence and then, you know, go into basics. Haydn, I think Haydn is the Haydn moment. Well, it's my favorite composer anyway, but it's a Haydn moment. It's a Haydn to go back to roots and say, what really makes us incredibly happy? So yes, Victor, adelante.
Thank you, Angel. This question is for Fabienne from Maria Angélica Bejarano from Colombia Concertante. Nowadays, the first revenue resource is streaming. Have been analyzed and renegotiate the royalties according to this situation?
The question is how they adapted, or
if have been analyzed and renegotiate the royalties according to this situation. I think she means about the prices or streaming the payment.
Yeah. I mean, there is a discussion which also was reflected in what I witnessed. so that the artists now go more in the direction of not using subscription models that much anymore. So not using Spotify, Bandcamp, and all these models heavily that much anymore, maybe additionally, but also to see possibilities of, for example, using Patreon link or creating your own space and website so that you have the full control on your content, on who is supporting you. Also to be more interactive with your audience and with your community, to create a space digitally where you have more control of what to share and how to share it and how to monetize. And so I think there are more and more business models now coming up, because in the beginning exactly it was like everybody streaming online. I think it was also a reflection on the fear of non-existing and the fear of being suspended totally as a whole sector, like the art sector being absolutely suspended. So to still remain controlled, that people can see and hear you. But now I think, as I said, a next phase is starting. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, great, Fabienne. I have one question for Hobart. So this question is from Victoria Arcilla from the Banda de Música de Baracaldo in the País Vasco in Spain. What do you think about working on showing our performances throughout regional TV channels, considering the age of our regular attendees, not precisely eager or trained to new technologies?
You know, that's a fascinating question, because in the beginning of my time in Odessa, we actually stopped television broadcasting because I was so frustrated with the poor quality of the technology that they had. And the technology at that time was way behind technology in Western Europe or North America. So we actually did television broadcasts, but we stopped them because of the bad quality. We actually right now are giving some of our videos, which have been well produced from live concerts, to a new television channel in Ukraine, which is going, I hope, to be showing them. But it's for us, it's a tough question, because I think in terms of creativity, we're probably up to the curve. But in terms of technology, we're not necessarily up to the curve for us. But it's a good question. I mean, how do you reach the audience? You know, a lot of young people are not even just television. In Odessa, actually, a lot of young people don't even watch television. They're much more on Facebook and social media. Even though, actually, an interesting fact, Odessa is the capital of all of Europe for the number of regional television channels there are. There are about 30 regional television channels in the city of Odessa, city of 1.2 million people, with 30 regional television channels, and they all compete with each other. So it's I don't know how many viewers they actually have. So yeah, it's a tough question. I love the idea of trying to present more chamber music within, you know, just coming back to what Angel had said about chamber music. I remember that symphony of Weinberg that I talked about. Half of that piece, it's a 1 hour symphony. 30 minutes of the symphony, there's no more than 5 or 6 different instruments playing, which is an amazing fact. It makes the piece quite unique. And we're going to be doing concerts with small ensembles and trying to webcast them. That's something we really look forward to doing, because we've never done it really before. So I don't know if I've answered the question, but I've tried to explain our perspective on that.
Yes, thank you, Hubert. I have a question for Hugo. Hugo from Ana Mateo. How do we balance this time of silence with the economic part of our business side of the arts, let alone income for artists themselves?
Not the best question for me. But yes, that is, of course, a dilemma, that the silence one, the luxury of going off to and going to an ashram and meditating. One doesn't need the money to survive. So again, I think it's also it's a prioritizing, it's a balance. As all these things, everyone finds themselves in different situations. Some people have the luxury of sitting at home for 4 months and being in silence and creating. Some people don't have that luxury. And I think for everyone, it's an individual question, it's an individual balance. And just as we all re-emerge from this time, we all re-emerge differently in our own ways. And I think for me, the essence of all art making is in the word authenticity. It comes back to being true to oneself. And I think that the question is the same when it comes to money and creativity. What is true to you? What are your needs? And one needs to respond from that and respect that and respect other people, and not give a defining judgment on how it should or shouldn't be. But everyone needs to respond in ways that feel, aha, this comes out of the stillness. I think the more stillness and silence we can create within ourselves, the more riches we will have, not in the sense of money, but I think riches in other ways. But that's just, again, that's my personal view, and I wouldn't want to impose that on anyone. But that's how I feel creatively rich, is by immersing myself in silence.
Thank you, Hugo. I have one question for Angel. One question more for Angel from Penny Brill from the Pittsburgh Symphony and USA. What is your concept of active listening? What is your vision of how that could manifest itself?
So the question is how active listening manifests itself?
Yeah, what is your concept of active listening?
Exactly. So in order to listen actively, you have to relate to what is happening on stage. And this is something that actually Hugo mentioned before. We have lost the contact with our audience. Our audience is becoming very passive. So if you bring elements where the audience relate more, then you have a much more active listening. So just to give you a simple example, as I said before, we tell stories. One of the last beautiful performances we had was we told the story of Debussy attending for the first time the Universal exhibit in Paris in 1889 and listening to a gamelan orchestra, the Indonesian traditional music. So we filled the cathedral with 2 gamelans and put the orchestra in the middle, and we told that story. We created a dialogue. So the audience was actually moving from one place to the other. When the orchestra was playing, they were in front of the orchestra, they were moving to the gamelan, etc. So you have to create elements to which the audience relate. And that's, to me, the key.
Nathaly, could I just add an example?
Yeah, sure.
Like Angela, I think we work in very similar ways, and I love what you're doing. Maybe one example at MODÄRNT, at the festival we did, just to re-engage the listeners. We had the Handel Messiah, which, again, a piece which people have heard hundreds and hundreds of times, and would interspersed within different arias, different recitatives. We had a rap artist and his group basically giving a modern commentary in the suffering in the wars in Syria, the famine in Africa, and reworking the words of the Messiah to relate specifically to problems we're addressing now. And I'm not saying musically everyone's going to fall in love with this, but it re-engages people with the text, with the power of something like Handel's Messiah, which in today it becomes for many people a historical artifact. It's a piece we bring into the present, but we've got to recreate it in the present as though it was written yesterday, and bring the audience into that so they can relive it as though it was written yesterday. For me, that's just an ad for active listening.
Thank you, Hugo. So with that final reflection, we go to my colleague Gosha, so she will do some upcoming announcements.
Thank you so much, Nathaly. I would like to thank all of you, our wonderful panelists, for sharing your expertise and your thoughts, and also bringing a lot of optimism within this session. I would like to, using this occasion, I would like to invite you all to participate in our upcoming sessions. And the good news is that we're setting the stage, our joint series with the Association of Spanish Orchestras will be continued throughout June. So please join in for our June sessions, June 4th, Finding First Solutions, Contracts and Cancellations, as well as June 11th, A Midsummer Night's Dream Festivals. So please tune in every Thursday at 1 p.m. New York time and 7 p.m. Madrid. Hope to see you all here. Have a great evening, have a great afternoon, have a good day, stay healthy, and we all hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.